The insurrection in the War on David started long before David was born, creating the character in the Nazi contingency to overthrow these United States by systematic abuses against the public, including exponential quantities of torture, psychological, physical, and every other kind. This is an all-out espionage war. This is a perfect war. This is the most anti-American system that they can generate through Confederate witchcraft or magic. The functionality of these abuses has actively targeted myself and many others for these exponential injuries and defamations. Through the human trafficking, through the surveillance system, they enforce a poison script, which is systematic strawman arguments, specifically generated to sell a false narrative. Brett Kavanaugh's false position under the position that he claims that these programs are fine because they're not supposed to use the information in order to generate convictions off of the fruit of the poison tree. Generous as that might seem, it is inadequate and still treason. That active function of this overthrowing of the United States is polluting the public interest through the public courts. The court of public opinion being polluted by the defamation, by the systematic removal of the legitimate schedules versus the fruit of the poison tree strawman arguments, proves criminal subversion even against their overly generous policy. This is the function of overthrowing the United States by a Confederate government against the American Republic. Those subversions specifically acknowledge the military intelligence, which involves everything that they know from the actual schedules, the ones that they didn't pollute, the ones that they view as a threat to their insurrection. And those schedules include their motive to have generated the war in Ukraine, which was, and will continue to be exclusively the war on David. It is targeted by double agents in the United States government to have coaxed Russia into the conflict. Russia being brought into it by their enemy schedule are being funneled into it by the double agents in the American government loyal to the Confederacy, or unlimited, unrestrained, and immoral systems of magic. The systems of defamation, of lies, perpetuate their core loyalties to Satan, their Lord and Master, which is a government-established religion. And that, in the justices' opinion, when they said that liberty includes the government's ability to legislate morality, which is specifically prohibited, makes a government-established religion, makes Satanism the government-approved religion for everyone, with or without your consent. These systems specialize in the black market, have a hankering for the child abuse systems through the surveillance programs. Your inability to protect your children from the abuse is criminal neglect. There is a functional obligation to parents and anyone who wants to be a parent to protect their children from the use of the government in these programs. The War on David has to concede to the Americans under David Bowles from his original title. The character, David Bowles, from military intelligence, has to be the starting assets acknowledged to the second parties. The acknowledged assets sent to them qualifies their original schedules. Their original schedules qualifies what they promote as their first series offers to David Bowles for his signature on the final chord. That qualifier of each stage happening in its correct order and its correct process without the subversion, incomplete legitimacy, good faith, and upstanding behavior is the only way to protect your children from being tortured and raped and abused in the worst imaginable ways, as their national loyalty is Revelation Satanism. And as the day of Noah, so Revelation will be. They only consider evil day and night. It is their core, singular, functional loyalty. Unrestrained, contemptible evil is their religion. Their belief of their legitimacy concerning targeting the character for David Bowles came with their confession in its due position, which is to be uncensored and published. Congress, the president, governors, everyone should uncensor and publish and enforce the obligation. There is an lawful obligation to do so, and their justification to the obstruction is their assumption that David, as a toddler, was qualified to be on the Joint Chiefs of Staff as a top-ranked general. And that assumption isn't to be subverted by the idea that a child doesn't belong there, so much as they're concerned that he would have been successful. The functionality of before I was born, before any of this was even remotely viable, decades ahead, they had this in their head, that this had to be established, and they had to pre-script all of their crimes and justifications. Their poison script is designed to attack the rest of them. So they assault and represent the opposite of their belief. And that functionality of the opposite of their belief qualifies everything in the public in a stated illusion. Everything. The economy, who got elected, everything. There is no legitimate systems in society. Society has been subject by hate group, and hate crimes is terrorist violence. And that terrorist violence, such as through the Neo-KKK, which is the surveillance system, includes social, religious, political, etc. The bigoted violence they have no government authority to conduct is conducted by individual terrorists without a legal government loyal to the Confederacy to destroy this country. They are terrorist traitors. Their qualifiers includes the economy generated by David Bowles' character from the military intelligence schedule, where they functionally believed that David Bowles is currently a trillionaire, who, after mastering the American government systems, oligarchy, etc., would have felt safe to have started his own country from those trillions of dollars in order to engage in the international affairs for international stability for the American interest, which, being the peak American interest, is criminal for them to subvert, because that is what they're doing. War against America. Their assumption to the generation of that new world brokerage system, country thing, or whatever it is they thought, assumed the training and all preparations through specialty schools that would have been designed by David Bowles' father, and that would have included all of the trade school funneling into the specific expertise in the full diversity of responsibilities. They believed that David would have become fully trained in oratory skills, including pastoral and comedian, and other support systems, which would have generated the ability to have conveyed all of the obligations of those offices, qualifying everyone's inherent draw to the charismatic nature of the superior system, in which case, even if you could find other people to do equivalent services, which is currently not viable, they would still choose David over all of the other ones due to the superiority in full capacity, as was trained by Steve Jobs and his perfectionist nature. This generates David's systems of reporting for national news and international 24-hour news. Under his systems, making David Bowles the most censored comedian in world history. That censorship and abuse qualifies their following of the full system from the military intelligence on everyone they believed would have directly been connected to David's networks, supporting the functional creation of his nation after his control over the United States government. On that list, they believed the Japanese would have been a heavily influential noble class in that country designed by David Bowles, at which point everyone that would become a civilian would functionally have to be created as a noble, seeing as how the only way for them to acquire citizenship is to have been a part of the economy as a top-ranked corporate owner, generating a certain quantity of wealth, establishing them as rich, influential, powerful, political, influential members of society, certifying their qualifiers to separate into David's state with each treaty-holding nation, and that confidence of all of these treaties and all of these countries compound exponentially, but they believed functionally that David would have had a high, potent relationship with the Japanese from the very beginning in the creation of the systems. And like Ukraine, they are in danger. And that danger is the genocide against David's race, and that race is David's society and culture, and the extermination of David's culture, erasing it from history, is contemptuous genocide. This continues onto the assumption that David, from the record, would be the savior of Europe, and qualifying his established treaties inside Europe through his government, which capital was projected to be in Greece, would have stopped the double agents in America from using American equipment to invading Israel for the trigger under the secrecy clause. And all of the subversions currently happening in the Supreme Court and the rest of it, and the California Civil War, and the position of protecting the obstructions from the Supreme Court falsely assuming that hereditary slavery is a states' rights issue. That would genocide the Jewish race, as well as anyone that would have been a part of the original nation for David Bowles in all of the other countries, which specifies David's having solved it in Europe and all of the other places. Their original qualifier as the savior of Europe makes it national security for each of their countries. They are being systematically targeted by espionage, planting traps and subversions to collapse in on them by the insurgencies. They are being targeted by messing with the enemy systems from the double agents in the United States, using its intelligence systems to collapse their countries. There is an obligation to protect international law and international human rights from these programs, which are specifically targeting them for their evil purposes and fetishes.